Hello everyone and welcome to round 1 of the 2019 Grand Chess Tour in Zagreb. It's Magnus Carlsen versus Anish Giri. Well, Anish Giri has the white pieces, so basically it's Giri versus Carlsen. It's a really strong tournament. 9 of the 10 of the strongest players in the world are playing there. We're gonna talk about that a bit some more in some other videos in this series, and then of course talk about the standings, but at the moment we don't have any since this is round 1. So without further ado, let's just enjoy the game. Giri with the white pieces opens with e4. We don't have any photos as of yet, but I hope we will have some to enjoy for the videos to come. Carlsen replies with c5, saying I have my World Chess Championship preparation ready if you're interested. We have knight to f3, knight to c6, and here Giri not interested in main lines. He goes bishop to b5. And okay, we have e6 by Carlsen, Giri captures, we have b captures, and now d3. So Carlsen could at some point push d5 if he wanted to, but he is interested in a different line. He goes knight to e7. This knight can now go to g6, and Giri pushes h4. Now, if knight g6, he's ready to meet it with h5, kick the knight back to where it came from. So Carlsen pushes h5 himself, and here Giri pushes e5, prevents any d5 action now, as e captures on d6 en passant would be played. And here Carlsen says that he knows this line. Of course, Giri knows it as well, and he knows that f6 is the main line here. But he says that Giri most likely prepared for that move. Knight to f5 also an idea, but here Carlsen played d6, and the way Carlsen explains it, he played this move instead of f6, even though he doesn't really have anything prepared for it. He wanted to play the man, not the position. And he also said d6 seems so stupid that there's no way Giri checked it at home with a computer. So that's why he played, and it was played only once before. Alexander Motliev versus Alexei Fedorov last year in Batumi in the European Individual Championship. That game was won by Fedorov, but the game continued similar like this one. Giri played e captures on d6, but in that game knight was transferred to f5. But here Carlsen plays knight to g6, and this is now a new move. So Magnus is ready to capture on d6 on the next move, and Giri has to find a plan now. So, of course, you want to get your knight to c4. With Carlsen's doubled c-pawns, a c4 is an excellent outpost for the knight. You can either go this knight to c4 here, or you could go knight to a3 and bring this knight over here. Giri decides for knight to d2, bringing this knight to c4. With bishop captures on d6, and now knight to c4, an excellent outpost for Giri's knight. And Carlsen retreats, not interested in giving up the bishop pair. Bishop to e7. Bishop to c7 seems like a better move, as you know, it controls the knight a little bit better, but then you allow bishop to g5. So Carlsen just moves it back to e7. And we have knight to c3 now. And how do you continue with black? Carlsen finds a very nice way to develop his light square bishop. Bishop to a6. You want to get rid of this knight from c4. Giri plays queen to f3. He says, okay, if you capture on c4, I'm capturing on c6 with check. Carlsen says, not a problem. We have bishop captures on c4, queen captures on c6, a nice in-between move. We have king to f8, and now, of course, d captures on c4. And here we have just knight captures on h4. Carlsen grabs a pawn, he's ready to retreat with the knight, and now if Giri castles kingside, he has his h-pawn ready to be pushed forward. And it is in fact what Giri does. A safer idea would be something like queen to e4. You retreat to e4, you can go bishop e3, this rook to d1, but Giri castles kingside. We have knight back to f5 now by Magnus. That's a very safe square for the knight, as you don't have an e-pawn to kick it away. You're not kicking it away with the g-pawn. You don't have a light square bishop, so the only piece of Giri's that can challenge Magnus' knight on f5 is this knight here, if you play something like knight e2 to g3. And interestingly, this is exactly what Giri does. Without developing any of his other pieces now, he wants to execute this part of his plan. So he played knight to e2, which seems like, as Magnus later put it in the interview, really poor move. The normal way to continue would be something like rook to d1, you attack the queen on d8, maybe force a queen trade, you go bishop to f4, also an idea. But Giri plays knight to e2, and of course we often say that a move with the knight back is the hardest to find and usually the strongest. This is not one of those cases. So Carlsen continues. We have rook to c8, attacking the queen, and now another interesting choice of moves by Giri, queen to a4, which really brings the queen away from all the action, as all the action will be happening on the king side. Giri castled king side. Carlsen does have an h-pawn ready to be pushed, so playing the queen to e4 isn't really all that great. Queen to e4, on the other hand, would be really nice, as it would control this entire diagonal, which might be important later. So Carlsen finds a nice plan. First he is thinking about whether to give up his a7 pawn or not, but he decides to defend it, as he doesn't think he's in any kind of a hurry. First, rook to c7, going after, defending the a7 pawn. And here Giri was walking around, and when he saw rook to c7, he immediately sat down and he played bishop to f4, which is really nice. He gets to develop the bishop without losing time, and he can play rook ad1, pretty much finish development of all of his pieces. So Carlsen goes rook to d7, gains control of the d file, and now, you could play knight to g3, just continue the game. Here, Giri doesn't like the idea of this knight being able to come to d4. For example, if this knight comes to d4, probably going to have to capture it, and then Carlsen gets this very strong d4 pawn. So Giri plays c3, but Giri does not have this much time to play knight e2 and c3. You cannot play positional chess in a position where there are so many attacking ideas. So feel free to pause the video here and try to find the move Carlsen played in this position, as it's really just a very nice idea. Well, I'll give you a couple of seconds. Don't have my water ready, unfortunately. For those of you who were able to do it, congratulations. You are an excellent attacker of the king side. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, g5 is the move Carlsen played. And here, Giri really has to decide what to do with the bishop. If you play something like e5, bishop to e5, for example, Magnus will just keep on coming for you. f6, you're going to have to go back with the bishop. Then h4 is coming, g4, g3. And it's going to be very hard to defend this attack. So Giri tried a different line. Instead, he played, instead of this bishop to e5, he played rook a to d1. A very active idea, as now Carlsen's rook is under attack twice. So Carlsen trades once with rook captures, and now where does Carlsen go with the queen? It's very important to choose an excellent square. We already mentioned a very important diagonal a bit before in the video, if you remember. He plays queen to a8, and now you see what a nice diagonal this queen has. Now you already see threats like knight to h4, followed by queen g2 checkmate. You can push h4, h3, followed by queen g2 checkmate, and it would be so much nicer for Giri if this queen was on e4, then queen to a8 would not be even possible, and it's very hard to imagine what the queen is doing on a4. If Giri played it there just to try and attack the a7 pawn, that is really weird. But okay, now Giri has to again decide what to do with the bishop. He moves it to c7, and now Magnus just continues. One way you could play it is knight to h4, we already mentioned it, and then after you prevent checkmate with f3, just push g4 and white will fall apart eventually. But Carlsen goes for a different line. He chooses the strongest move recommended by the engine, that is h4, preparing h3. Here Giri played f3, and after f3 Carlsen just played h3, and it was in this position that Anish Giri resigned the game, as it's just pointless to play this. Whatever you play pretty much loses. And I will explain why it's so pointless. First, we should also show that instead of f3, Giri could have played rook to d3. It does make Magnus work for his meal a little bit more, but it's still a very nice line. If Giri played this, we would have a much more exciting game, a much longer game, not ending in 23 moves, which is an insane miniature for modern times. 23 moves was a nice miniature in Morphy's era. But here, Carlsen will just continue with h3. And here, you will either capture, for example, g captures on h3, and then comes knight to h4. Again, you threaten checkmate, and now you have to block it. Let's say rook g3, now g4. So this is something we probably would have seen if Giri played rook to d3 line. But then, of course, you either have to open up the h file or you play with rook. But then knight f3 check, king f1, and then rook captures on h3. There's no stopping rook h1. I mean, okay, you could play something like knight g1. It does prevent it, but still rook h1, and there's not much for white to do here. You bring the queen into the game, but now queen b7, and now the bishop is lost. You don't really have a good square for it. You can move it, but then you again get something like f6. If you don't move it there, if you try something else, you could try bishop to f4 immediately. Then you get e5, the knight is guarding the e5 square, and then after you move it, where you're going to move it, you can't move it here. The rook has to keep an eye on the knight. You can't move it here. Black will just capture it. You can move it here, but then you get knight h2 check, you lose the rook, and there's nothing to do here. So white completely falls apart in every line here. So after h4 he played f3, but after h3 he now loses as, well, lines are getting opened. You can go knight g3, but then knight to h4. You just continue attacking the g2 square, queen c2, you bring the queen back. Again, queen b7 harasses the bishop because the knight now prevents it from retreating backwards. You can try rook d7 here, but now queen c6 attacks both the rook and the bishop. Queen d1 defending the rook, but now h captures on g2, and not much you can do here. There's no defense against knight captures on f3, as the queen cannot defend both the f3 pawn and the rook here. You can try something, knight e4, but you get knight captures on f3 either way. And here, if you don't want to give up the rook after queen captures and queen captures on d7, you can go king captures here, but then knight h4 check, king f2, you just lose the knight. There are so many winning lines here for black, it's impossible to show even a small fraction of them. So yeah, after h3, Giri resigned the game, and well, a spectacular win for Magnus Carlsen in round 1 of the Zagreb Grand Chess Tour with the black pieces in 23 moves. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. A little bit shorter video than the Capablanca versus Lasker game 1, but you know, it seems like this is modern chess now. Everyone inspired by Alpha Zero, you know, just attack, and it seems like you know, it's a good time to to watch chess now. But yeah, I would like to thank Matthew Smith, Jason Fernandez, Anthony McCann, Nathaniel Clinton, and David Gale for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the Capablanca saga, and of course, covering the games of the Grand Chess Tour in Zagreb. Thank you all, I will see you soon, have an excellent rest of your day.